Hi, how's it going? Today I wanted to talk about the mind portion of the mind-body-spirit connection. All three of them make up a whole human being. And I'm going to discuss specifically the mind, but there will be overlaps and redundancies with regards to how that connects to our body, how that connects to our emotions, our spirit, and how we can impact the mind through those other two avenues as well. So again, there will be some repetition and overlapping, but ultimately the goal here is that by the end of this series, we'll have a better understanding of how to kind of tap into ourselves through these different aspects and categories of what makes up the whole. Okay, so in the last video, I discussed a little bit about how the mind is the control panel. Because, well, not just the mind, but where it lies, which is the brain, okay? The mind is is part of our spirit in a sense, because it's the part of us that stays connected to the spirit. The brain functions on its own in a sense, as long as the body is working. The mind is all of our memory, all of our information, our belief systems, and all of that stuff, which is mainly what we need to work with. Because the brain also helps our body with involuntary functions, like keeps our lungs breathing, right? Our heart pumping, our digestive system digesting. Right? And there's other systems too, like lymphatic, which is our drainage. And there's all kinds of things that go on in our body that we're not necessarily being mindful of or have even a choice over necessarily. That is mainly the brain's function. The mind rests in the brain and utilizes the brain for emotion regulation, for cognitions and belief systems, and how to actually hold memory, because those areas are in the brain, but it's the mind that kind of what we're going to talk about isn't necessarily the brain and the functioning involuntary functions or that part where it connects with the body. We're going to deal more with the conscious level and even subconscious to some degree, and how we can impact that. Sometimes it's those belief systems, those thoughts that can actually impact our body too. You know, because oftentimes if we hold a lot of negative thoughts about ourselves or belief systems, we can kind of manifest that into reality, because consciousness there's a lot about it that we don't understand. In fact, I just saw I posted a meme yesterday, I believe, and it was talking about quantum physics and how it can relate to consciousness and how they can interact with each other in a sense. And it was just really, what I really liked about it is it was talking about how little we actually know. So I'm always cautious when we talk about universal laws or scientific laws with such a finite way of looking at it, because ultimately we want to almost question everything so that we can keep learning, because there's so much that we don't know. So with each individual, our mind is where we learn. Okay, we learn about our environment. Because if you think about it, I always tell people, as little kids, when our neurons are firing, we have these neurons and these dendrites, and they're trying to make connections in our brain. And this is why a toddler who's like maybe 2, 3, 4, everything is why? And what is that? What is that? Why? Right? It's because they have, if you look at a scan of their brain, it's firing, it's on fire because they're trying to make connections so that they can make some sense of understanding out of their reality. Because for a toddler, it would be similar to us landing on a foreign, I don't know, a foreign planet and seeing or encountering things and not having any idea what it is. Is it good for me? Is it not good for me? Is it safe? What is it? This is why little kids have no fear. Fear is learned, okay? Fear is learned. We don't come into this world with fear necessarily. I guess in some cases you could say maybe, but I'm talking specifically blank slate or whatever. We come in, yeah, we might come in with some predispositions, genetic, our mind, okay, may come in with some residual. If you believe in past lives, if you believe in the infinite soul, then I'm sure there's something beyond here, okay? But again, these are the belief systems we hold. Some people say, absolutely not, absolutely not. Other people say, absolutely, how could you think otherwise? So at the end of the day, these are the stories we tell ourselves, and oftentimes they're taught to us, right? So if someone grows up, oh God, this is why life is so cool, right? Because you have so many different cultures, so many different spiritual and religious belief systems, so many different family type makeups and just cultural belief systems, never mind individual belief systems, or, it's just really phenomenal how much we can be very different while also being so connected and similar. Because everybody experiences different emotions on some level. Even someone that you would consider a psychopath or what we used to say sociopath, right? Maybe no emotions whatsoever or whatever. No, they still experience it, just not maybe the same as the neurotypical, okay? Same thing with people that might be on the spectrum. They're going to experience things at different sensitivity levels. What differentiates is oftentimes they don't know what to do with it, okay? And that's a generalization because that's why it's called a spectrum. But in all honesty, almost everything we can experience is experienced on a spectrum, okay? So, and it's how we experience things that often define the belief systems we form around them, right? So you can have two people go experience the same thing, but depending on what they're bringing into it, what kind of baggage, what kind of belief systems, so an example, right? If somebody believes in a higher power, believes in angels or other things that protect them, right? And they get into a car and they're with a friend who believes in nothing outside of what they see, okay? Or what they think they know. And I say that because none of us know everything, regardless. Because the more you learn you need to learn. It's an infinite rabbit hole, okay, of knowledge. So don't ever think you've got it all figured out. You may have your little bit at that point with regards to what you're in alignment with, figured out for you. But there's always going to be another person with an opposing belief system. It's very arrogant and egotistical for us to assume that we're the only right answer. And there's a lot of arrogant and egotistical people in the world. So at the end of the day, you put it where it goes, okay? Not, we'll just leave that there. Because there's a lot of people that think they have all the answers. So be it. You do you, boo. Okay? Nobody does, though. because we're always learning. That's why we have that saying, learn something new every day, because you can. Doesn't mean people put themselves out there to do so, but there's always something more to learn. Always. So in any case, depending on what we're coming into it with. So if you believe you're safe and protected, you get into an accident, you might have a belief system that's more fluid that says, well, maybe this happened to protect me from something worse. Or maybe this had to happen, but I knew my angels were with me and I'm not afraid of death because I know where I'm going, or believe I know where I'm going, and all this other stuff. And again, fear is learned. So usually people aren't afraid of death until they start learning to fear it. Now, I'm not talking about that impulse to stay alive. Okay, we all have that impulse in us to stay alive. But that doesn't always equate to fear. It only becomes fearful if that's being threatened, right? And for some people, that's reality. So in any case, they might walk away from this accident okay, because they were able to work with that energy of trauma, of fear, and kind of transmute it into something else, in the sense that they can tell themselves, well, maybe that happened for my best and highest good, even if it is perceived to be a negative thing. You know, if I get into an accident here, maybe it kept me alive. I might be injured, but maybe it kept me alive. Or maybe I needed to be injured to inspire someone else on how to come through that. I don't know. There's so many different ways of looking at it. Okay. So I'm just giving some examples here and there, but there are so many different examples. However, if the other person had more concrete belief systems around what does and doesn't exist, and feel like they're walking through life, I should say, exposed and unsafe, and really feel unsafe in their environment, or this, that, depending on what they're focusing on and feeding themselves and believing, okay, they might end up with PTSD. That's how important the mind is. You know, we call it a mental health day sometimes. Our mental health, outside of how we use it, okay, the term, is really about having a healthy way of thinking. Now, positive thinking is far better for you. However, we also don't want to be unrealistic. Now, again, much like I already said, what's real and what isn't is a bit fluid, in the sense that we're always learning that. Like, for instance, we know more about space, and we don't have much knowledge outside of our solar system other than what we can observe with really advanced telescopes. And I know I watched a really cool documentary of a satellite that was released, I think it was in the 70s, and it has since left our solar system. But I remember at one point it turned around, I think it was Voyager or something, and it turned around and you see this little tiny dot, and that was the Earth. And I'm like, that is so cool. That is so cool. I love learning. I do. Stay curious, my friend. In any case, we don't know much outside of that, but we still know more about space, supposedly, this is what I've heard, than we do about the depths of our oceans and what's in there. We're always discovering. We're finding life forms in the ocean that we thought were extinct. I'm sure we could say the same thing about our planet with different things, depending on where we explore and go and where it's safe to. I don't know. We live on a cool planet. We do. So that's what I mean. Like, we're always learning. Hopefully, we're always open to learning. And that's what I mean by being fluid. I'm not saying that every thought or belief system you have isn't good. That's not true. A lot of what you believe probably is true in this, that, or whatever. But we always want to be, this is one of those connection points. We always want to be mindful, aware, okay? Pay attention to the energy / emotion behind or that our thoughts and beliefs are feeding. And how does it make us feel? What are we sitting in when we are feeding a belief system? And when I say feeding a belief system, I'm not saying, well, I want to believe this, so I'm going to sit here and I'm going to, No, it's off. Most of the time, it's not even that conscious, okay? It's through mindfulness that we can become more conscious of the belief systems we hold, how they make us feel, how that sits in our body, right? And this is the importance of the connection, because regardless of which avenue we come at it from, as we make these connections, it will inform us. I'll probably give this example again at some point if I haven't already. I don't know. I talk a lot. I remember driving into work one day, and all of a sudden I had this sharp pain right here. And I was like, oh. And because I had been making connections, I realized if I'm getting a sharp pain there, usually means I'm clenching my jaw, which means I'm stressing about something. That's the importance of these connections, which then helps me to pivot to focus on the area that I can impact it through, which was my thinking. Yeah, I did a body scan too, because sometimes I might clench my jaw if I'm stressing because I have physical pain someplace or something's going on in my body. So you can do a full body scan and see, like, all right, anything going on here. You don't have to do anything but think through it. Go to the different muscle groups, kind of like progressive muscle exercises, right? Or relaxation exercises. You just kind of go sectionally and you see what's going on in my body. I did that, nothing. Which I think I was just trying to avoid what I was thinking, because I'm like, well, maybe it's my body and I'm not stressed over thoughts. The stories we tell ourselves, right? So in any case, I realized, all right, it's not my body, so must be my thoughts. Let's sit with them, right? And then I realized what I was doing was I was literally perseverating over a meeting I had to have with the state that day. And I was like, I had never done this type of meeting before, and I felt ill-prepared at this point, and I was just coming to my office, right? So I'm like, through my body, I did some deep breathing to help relax. Through my senses, I put on some classical music, which helped me to relax. And then I did some cognitive restructuring. I pushed back on it a little bit. And I said, well, it's valid that I need to get more prepared, but I can't look at the file until I get to my office. So worrying about it and overthinking about it in the car isn't doing anything for me. In fact, what it is doing is giving me a pain in the head, right? So I was doing physical things to regulate my emotions, which is really important because emotions can trigger the mind into more thinking. It can also trigger the body into anxiety responses. Clenching my teeth, headache is one thing. Other people might have digestive issues or sharp pains in their chest or hyperventilate, in which case then you're not even safe driving, right? So again, this is how they all interact. So be mindful of your connections. How does it present for you? because it's going to present a little differently for most people. Yes, there are some typicals like I just mentioned, but again, each person is an individual and may have different presentations. So be aware, be mindful of how you present so that when that comes up for you, it doesn't have to be a crisis. You can catch it early on because you recognize it, right? You made that connection, that neuron and dendrite, right? You made that internal connection of this is what this typically means for me. How do I handle that? And then you figure out through practice what works for you. Sometimes it's tangible grounding. Other times it's in the mind. Am I shaming myself? Am I shaming others? Am I victimizing myself? Now, don't get me wrong. Sometimes we are victims in life, but we don't have to identify as a victim. We can overcome that. Perfect example of that, mindset, right? I remember watching a documentary of two men that were prisoners in Auschwitz at the same time. In fact, their tattoo, there was only one number between them. So they weren't in line together when they first arrived at the concentration camp. They both went there with a wife and kids. They both lost their entire family. I don't have to get into descriptives. We understand what went down there. And if you don't, do your own research. We're not here to trigger. But they both basically went through hell. Okay? One person out of the two went on, moved to the United States, ended up remarrying, starting his own business, having another family, and living a happy life, or happy for him, right? I can't speak to his mentality. I just know different things indicate different things, and he ended up thriving. Years later, they were doing this documentary and they were looking for survivors from this tragedy, this terrible, terrible thing. And they ended up putting these two people back in the same room together. And the other man could never get over the loss of his family, could never get over the atrocities that he went through, and ended up pretty much spending the rest of his life at the bottom of a bottle, okay? Feeling like the victim he was. He was a victim of some really bad people's choices, for sure. He didn't have to identify as a victim. So I think I did a video on here about identity. How do you identify? Those are some of those really foundational belief systems we hold about ourselves. And in those belief systems, sometimes we pack ourselves into this small restraining box or even self-imposed prison that doesn't allow us to flow and grow and learn and move forward. Pain can do that. Unresolved trauma, unhealed trauma can hold us stuck. But it's our mindset, how we choose to think of things, what we choose to focus on, what belief systems are we feeding that determine how we move forward, if we move forward. Another example, and this is where you can kind of make that connection for yourself. I went to this retreat one time and I was talking to this woman, because again, I like to talk. And in any case, she was sharing with me how she was, I forget, I think she was a dentist or something. She was a doctor of some discipline. I don't remember what it was, but she had a very active life. She played sports. She was very active physically. She was active mentally because she went and got her PhD, or actually in this case, I think she's actual doctor of some sort of dentistry, I think. So she wasn't lazy by any means. This is my point. However, she was sharing with me, because this was a healing retreat. She was sharing with me how she can't seem to get over this hurdle of thinking of herself as lazy. And I was like, well, we were getting ready to do a yoga exercise and meditation, so we couldn't really get into it in the moment. But as she was sitting down, she realized she left her yoga mat in her car. So she asked one of her friends that she had come there with, can you grab my yoga mat? Because I'm sitting here and I'm too lazy to get it. Those were her words. So I was like, okay, we're going to have a talk later. So we ended up sitting down after dinner, and I said, did you notice what you said when you asked your friend to get your yoga mat? And she's like, oh my gosh, I called myself lazy. I said, yeah. So even though you may not believe that because you have evidence to prove otherwise, you are feeding a belief system that you are lazy. And it's those unconscious belief systems that's the filter in which we're living our life through. Sometimes we don't realize the belief systems we're feeding. We just know that we feel stuck in certain areas, or we can't break through this ceiling, whatever it may be. And we know on some level we're holding ourselves back, but we don't know how to get through it because we can't identify what's holding us back. That's the importance of the mind, the belief systems, and be mindful of what you're saying to yourself, how you talk to yourself, how you allow others to talk to you, okay? And what you're focusing on. If every day you're looking for bad things or bad news and you're focusing on everything bad in the world, you're not going to feel safe. That can then impact your body, because when you don't feel safe, essentially you're walking on eggshells. What do you think that does to you chemically? Throws off your nervous system, throws you into high cortisol. It's just, there's so many things that your mere thoughts can impact. So being responsible for what you're feeding your brain goes beyond politics, okay? These are things that you hear people in politics talking about, oh, programming, this, that, and everything else, but it goes way beyond that. That's just a sideline. That's just indicative of what's going on in our world right now, why it's so much in the forefront of everyone's thoughts. But ultimately, all of those words apply to how you are with yourself. What are the thoughts that you feed or repeat? Because our brain loves repetition, whether it's good for us or not, okay? What are the beliefs you are feeding? If you're terrified of flying because you heard of 5 different plane crashes, don't assume that there aren't 100,000 flying successfully every day. So with any fear that you are feeding or hold, always check. Your brain isn't going to like you for checking an opposing belief system because it wants to believe what you're telling it to believe. It wants to believe in consistency. So much so that it's really hard to even stomach an opposing belief system or an alternate belief system. Not everything is in opposition. It's just different than what you believe. Your brain is going to fight you on it. Doesn't make it true. Okay, so whether that's politics, whether that's family belief systems that were put on you, societal belief systems that are being put on you, when you can make those connections between your mind, body, and spirit and really sit with that and understand yourself on a deeper level and recognize the patterns that you're engaging in, that's when you're able to be truer to yourself. If I keep doing something that makes me miserable, sometimes people do that their whole life and don't even realize it. But they were told that was the right thing to do. But is it right for you? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe that was right for that person at that point in time because that was the way things were. But life is forever changing and alternating, cyclical. So yes, we come back around to different things like styles and fads and stuff like that. But ultimately, the more you can make those connections, the more you're going to understand yourself and be able to determine and discern what is right for you. And that is so important, because that's how we create our best life. That's how we find happy, if happy is what you want. Some people are so afraid of happy because they're still in that mentality, mind, of when's the next shoe gonna drop, or who's gonna pull the rug out from under my feet. So they'd rather be miserable to forgo the disappointment that would come from glimpsing happiness. Life does not have to be that way. Go inside and make your connections. Understand the impact. Do your research. You don't have to go to college. Buy a book. Learn about these things and how they apply to you, because how they apply to you may be very different than how they apply to the next person. Ultimately, it's all the same stuff, but everybody's unique. So the lessons you're going to learn from that is going to be very uniquely to you. All right, this is a long video, but it's so important. And we can see this on a daily basis around us. You can have two people sitting next to each other on a bench, and I swear to God, they're in two different universes. Quantum physics, baby. Read up on it. It's fascinating. Anyway, mentality, mindful state, it's so important, because how you integrate things in the other two avenues, how you feel, is going to be very different. I literally sat next to somebody and watched something, and I was so excited by it. And I was like, oh my God, this is awesome. I'm so happy right now. And they're looking at me like I was the devil, because they are so afraid and so miserable with everything they're perceiving in the moment. And I was like, how are we on two different universes? What am I seeing that you're not seeing? And maybe in my case, I'm just open. I'm open to possibility. My first affirmation that I started with was, I dwell in possibility. Through faith, anything is possible. I believe that. It's part of who I am now, because that was an intentional thought I chose, an intentional belief I chose to feed myself. And now it's ingrained, because that's how I approach life. It is. Not everything in life is great. Believe me, I've shared, oh my God, I have expired my share of angry, ugly tears in my lifetime. In fact, that's good for processing sometimes. Sometimes you just have to get it out of your system and not hold it, because that can impact us too, just not in the way we want. Nobody wants to be sick out here, right? So in any case, when I talk about mindfulness, I'm talking about being aware, awareness, presence, pay attention. We can't do that 24/7. We'd all be completely exhausted. But the more you recognize these patterns and make the tweaks and changes that maybe you think would be more in alignment for you, then the more your life is going to flow. And it's a process. It's not a one and done, and it's not quick. And this is why not everyone sticks with it. But only you can determine whether you're worth it or not. And if you don't think you're worth it, that's one of those mindset things I would say work on, because you are. But it's a moot point what I think. You have to think it in order for it to be true in your life. All right, this went way long. I haven't done a video this long in a while. So if you like it, if you find any benefit from it, please like, share, subscribe, comment. I love to hear from you. I do. I always get so giddy when someone reaches out. You don't have to agree with me. You don't. This is supposed to be a chat. You know, we live in a world now where everyone thinks that everyone has to agree, or they're just not. They're this, that, or whatever. No. I promise you we agree on some things. Because there's too many things to disagree on everything. I can tell you that. But that's not the point. It's really just meant to help in some way. But the process of it feels like you're taking 5 steps back before you move forward, because it's hard work to look at ourselves honestly and authentically. But that's where change happens. And I'm not saying change who you are. We're not changing personalities out here. We're just evolving into the best version of ourselves that we can be. And I wish you all the luck in the world with it, because it's not easy work, but it's so worth it. I say that all the time. Healing is not for the faint of heart. But whew, it's so wonderful when you start taking back your own power, making conscious, decisive choices that serve you. And I'm not talking throwing people under the bus or anything like that. No. But we're only as good for other people as we are for ourselves first. So start there. At least be good to yourself and grow from there. All right. Have a good one. Talk soon. Bye.